This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Welcome back to our show. I am very happy to have Arthur Miller with us. You may be wondering how that's possible. Didn't Arthur Miller, one of Marilyn Monroe's former husbands, die a long time ago? Well, I am proud to have Arthur Miller of the law firm called New York's Truck Stop with us today. Welcome to our show, Arthur.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and with you. And so let me just say at the outset, I'm an attorney with my own practice, but I also have a social media operation, New York Truck Stop, where I've been involved with issues, a sort of community site for people that operate trucks and buses in the course of their business here in the New York area. So that was the goal of New York Truck Stop.
Okay, thank you for telling me. So in other words, you're telling about new regulations, etc.
Absolutely. I've just, the short sort of bio, if you will, is that I worked as the in-house safety person for a trash hauler and actually collections here in New York a number of years ago. I got involved in a lot of regulatory issues, and this was both interstate transport and picking up trash at commercial firms in New York City, but also elsewhere in the region. And when I left that, I continued to do a lot of trucking matters. It's dealing with the DOT and dealing with overweights and qualifications of drivers and things like that. So the bulk of my practice has basically been dealing with firms that are governed by regulations concerning safety and environment and things like that.
Trucks, buses.
Exactly.
Commercial vehicles.
Yes. So
Arthur, here we are today to talk about congestion pricing. Congestion pricing.
Yeah, that's certainly in the news a good deal lately. This is today's June 27 of 24, and first I'll say I'm a longtime resident of the city. I live in Queens. I drive. I ride my bicycle. I walk. I take the trains. So I'm multimodal, just like many other people are. I work with the trucking industry a good deal, so I've not only followed the discussions about congestion pricing for many years, but also looked at the way this particular plan was set up. And the congestion pricing plan, New York's congestion pricing plan. I've been against it because I believe the way it was structured was that it posed an existential threat to life and commerce in New York.
Structured. Please flesh that out.
Yeah, so absolutely. So first of all, congestion pricing as a concept and an economic concept is that charge something for people to get into a particular area, and you can sort of tweak the rates to maybe discourage people from using their personal vehicles and try to encourage them to doing something else. In other words, putting a price point on it. As this plan has gone through, they've talked about how it's been implemented in some other cities, like London notably, Copenhagen, and some other places. And we do also have the concept of congestion pricing on some of the highways, where they have created these HOV lanes where there's a charge that maybe varies by the time of day. In other words, if you're stuck in traffic, if you're in a rush and there's a lot of traffic on the free lanes, the price of the HOV lane, or the high occupancy lane, would be higher, figuring, okay, maybe you're willing to pay a couple of bucks to go faster. That in essence is what congestion pricing means and does. What happened, and congestion pricing's been talked about for decades here in New York, not so much as congestion, but basically putting a toll on the free East River bridges to try to get some money coming in.
How did this idea get started?
So I think what happened is that first of all, in more recent memory, Mayor Bloomberg had the idea of, let's put the tolls on and we'll get some money. And with the idea of maybe we can sort of scare people out of coming and have the streets more open for other uses and things like that. The MTA that's been mismanaged and overblown for a long time.
Whose members of the board are from the real estate industry.
Absolutely, and that have great sway with the legislature in Albany, and then basically the governor picks the members of the board. Under Governor Cuomo's reign, they said, well, we need a certain amount of money. So what they did was they said, let's sell this idea of congestion pricing, and we'll use the money from that to fund the MTA and special projects. But what they did was they put a dollar value on it. They said that the program, and this is by law, it was adopted in the law in 2019, I think, that the funding has to...
Wasn't that Cuomo who put that into the law?
Correct.
Governor Cuomo himself went out of his way to put that in and sneak it into the
standing budget.
Exactly.
So there were, and so you know, again, when there's a rush at budget time, and there are a lot of issues, and people aren't paying attention, and they want to just get it done, or they're willing to look the other way. But what they did under the nice sort of sounding idea of having congestion pricing is that they tied it to that the program has to raise $1 billion a year, has to, by law, must raise $1 billion a year, and that $1 billion a year has to finance $15 billion of borrowing. In other words, they're going to take go to the public finance markets to get $15 billion. That's going to then go to the MTA, so it could use it for capital expenses and things like that. So.
And we, the taxpayer, will pay the interest.
Well, that's true, or it will come off the top. Now, first of all, the MTA, I think even as of 2019, was already looking at about $45 billion in debt. So another $15 billion would raise their debt level to $60 billion, 60. That's more than, I looked, I think it's more than 2/3 of the states in this country have a debt level less than $60 billion.
What the state's income is.
I mean, granted, all states are not the same size, but that's a huge number for an agency that's not accountable. And then to add insult to injury, to avoid the politicians that adopted this from getting the heat around election time, they created a separate, I think it's called the Traffic Assessment, Traffic Mobility Assessment Board, that was supposed to set the toll rates.
And who are the members of that board?
Mostly from the real estate industry, or there was a contractor who worked with them, and there was also a representative of the transit workers union.
I don't hear any name that belongs to a common person, a commuter, or a trucking industry person, or anyone who would be ordinarily forced to use the highway every single day.
Exactly, and there, to me, is the rub. So and I had seen before the final toll rates were set. I had. I'm involved. I go to chambers of commerce and other meetings and things like that. Professionally, it interests me, and certainly as a resident, it interests me. I see what's going on. And Jan Lieber, I'll say somewhat to his credit, said the legislature gave us the parameters. We're following the law. We're doing what we were told to do, which is to set a rate, and it's got to raise $1 billion a year. But what it didn't tell them to do is that they should set a rate that, first of all, doesn't really change people's behavior. In other words, for personal cars, and that was only one of the only guidelines in the statute. For personal cars, they could only be charged once a day. So they made that rate $15. But for the Ubers and the Lyfts and the cabs and things like that, so I think that which constitutes about 54% of the traffic, they're only going to be charged $2.50 a trip.
Oh, a
trip.
50 cents. They pay. They are 50% of the traffic, but they get
will only be charged $2.50 a trip. Trucks, in the meantime, will be charged, and again, it depends on the size of the truck, either $24 or $32 a trip. So cars were the only ones that were set per day. Trucks were going to be charged per trip. And the MTA's rationale was, well, at the bridges and the tolls, we charge a little more for the damage that trucks and heavier vehicles do, because maybe we'll have to replace the roadway on our bridge or tunnel a little faster. But from congestion pricing, not a penny of it was supposed to go back to the trucks, so that basically about 9% of the traffic, current traffic, are trucks, and they were asked to pay rates.
You know, I think that's very interesting, because there's certain basic needs that the people in Manhattan have. You know, like water, food, etc. And how do they get? And they have to get clothes.
Right.
And how do some of these basic needs, like food, clothing, tools, etc., come into the city?
It's actually more involved than that. I mean, there are people that deliver medical supplies, that bring blood, that take things back and forth, messenger services, and especially with the way the MTA had hours and hours of testimony and reams of evidence, and some have even said, why not just charge everybody the same rate? You just make it flat once a day or something like that. So they chose, in essence, to play favorites, and which is patently unfair. But again, for something like 92% or 91% of all all items are delivered by truck in the city. There's no rail, there's no this and that, and so those things have to come in. And then, of course, the way they set up this zone is that there are many companies who have to, because the current congestion pricing zone was basically, imagine a line across from river to river across 60th Street.
Across 60th Street, so that then again, you have another toll to get into this gated community.
Correct.
Gated community.
Which, when you're talking gated communities, that typically benefits the property owners. But
which means
that's another story.
Well, that's right, property owners. So and I noticed that gated community, there's a lot of redevelopment, which is chasing out the small business owner.
Absolutely.
What supermarkets are there being put in place? What small drugstores are there?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one of the problems. So it almost seems that taking a step back, in today's daily news,
yes,
so the MTA had a vote yesterday about putting the plan on hold until such time as the governor reintroduces it or whatever. But Janno Lieber, the head of the MTA, basically said that they were acting that he had to, putting certain projects on hold, he had to act as a fiduciary
Let's go back to who the members of the board are, who are the fiduciaries for, what do they, like, what corporations do they come from?
I mean, there's a mix. There are a number of different appointees, and I'm not...
Yes, the Partnership for New York, which is a group of selected corporate entities of the most, shall we say, the richest corporate entities.
Right.
Then there's, what is it, RXL?
RXR, that was...
RXR, yes.
So actually the prior chair was Scott Reckler, who's, I guess, out of the family RXR development. But he has not been. I don't know if they're a member presently.
There's an example.
But there are people who are out of that industry. There is someone, as I said, I think, who's from the Transit Workers Union. There's somebody from a charitable organization. But a lot of these groups have different funding and different commitments. There's certainly no one from the trucking industry. There may be someone from contractors, but it could be argued that a contractor's firm is expecting profits off of development. So, but somebody who actually delivers stuff, whether it's hospital beds or messenger service or things like that, those people are not necessarily represented, and they're certainly not voted on by the public. So, so they're doing what they think their mission is, and they're acting as fiduciaries to their mission, which is running mass transit. but that means they don't necessarily have the interest or were willing to listen to other voices. And I think that's why this all came to a head now.
Yeah. So have they ever gone down to ridden subway? Have they ever been on a subway platform?
I can't tell. I mean, I know they do. Some said Janet Lieber never does. I don't know, and I wouldn't hold them. They all have jobs to do. But this comment that they're acting as a fiduciary, their responsibility is to running the MTA. Yes. So when people who operate trucks, or when people say, I'm disabled, or I'm taking care of an elderly relative, or I live in an area of South Queens or whatever, and I work on a couple of different jobs, and I need my car for my tools, or a teacher, let's say, who teaches. I think there was a video. There was a teacher who lives in Manhattan, a music teacher who goes to more than one school because the Department of Education doesn't always have music teachers in each school, so she needs to take her instruments and things like that. They don't seem to be listening to that, because their mission, they view their mission as whatever's best for the subway. But if their board members are not from the average people, their mission is also to their board members. And hence I think that's a huge conflict, and it's problematic. They seem to have not been listening to the people, and I think that's why this has been coming to a head.
Well, I hope that's why it's been coming to a head, because as I looked below 60th Street, which is where the gated community will start, I don't see provision for any of our cars to park, hardly at all.
Right.
Certainly, there's no real provision for trucks to stop.
Which, and if I may, that's another issue we've had. See, there seems to be this attitude, and it's not just from the MTA, but it's from the city, and you hear it elsewhere. It's like, oh, that's a cost of doing business. They can deal with these things. So in other words, parking tickets. Particularly with COVID, and they've put on the outdoor dining to sort of save the restaurants in theory, but they keep taking away parking spaces, and you have a lot of the for-hire vehicles, the Ubers and the Lyfts. When they don't have a fare, sometimes they pull into an area that's supposed to be dedicated for trucks, or even, let's say, at a hydrant or something, and they're waiting for their next fare. So when the truck comes along and maybe they have a couple of deliveries, they then have to look for a spot. So if they can't find a spot, we don't necessarily want them circling around, creating more traffic and things. So sometimes they'll have to double park, because most of them are interested in just getting in and getting out. And so the problem with parking and parking tickets is a sign that the New York City DOT has not adequately provided for all of the road users. Now, again,
we used to have something called municipal parking garages.
Exactly. Those were sold off for profit.
Yeah.
Starting, I think, under Rudy Giuliani's reign. But still, I think over the years, as interest rates were so low, there do seem to be a heck of a lot more cars out there. But I think also because the subways haven't really been maintained, people are going to take whatever's most convenient for them.
Being maintained. If you go into the subways, even at off hours, they are pretty congested as it is.
And they don't always work. I have an elderly relative who happens to live in the zone, who I go in and take care of every once in a while. One of her caretakers is in South Queens. When she leaves, she has to take a bus to the train and then another train, and at the hours that she takes, sometimes the train isn't working. They have to divert.
Too often.
And the sad thing is, and this was a huge problem in getting the public to buy into congestion pricing, is that the MTA never committed to any specific project to improve, to grow ridership, or to improve capacity, or improve the riding experience. So far, the only thing that they've been saying is that we're going to build a Second Avenue subway. So I can't say I'm against the Second Avenue subway, but I live in Queens. This caretaker lives in South Queens, way away. It's not going to help her. Certainly not going to help me. And you're asking for us to pay for something that's really going to benefit whoever speculated, who bought up the properties near there.
And the new idea is that that's been floated and probably passed, is that outside of in the other boroughs, single-family housing should now become 3-story family housing. And with community redevelopment, does that mean that they're going to force off the sale of single-family houses to build 3- and 4-story buildings so that they can accommodate the immigrants, so they can accommodate the homeless?
Well, I don't know. That's, I mean, you know, again, a lot of these sale pitches are sort of like Orwellian logic, like they have what they call the open streets program, which involves actually closing streets to traffic so people can picnic in the middle of the street or something like that. But this city of yes is largely part of juicing up the zoning to make it allowable for people to put extra structure on their building or add to the zoning. So what's going to happen to that, with that, in theory, is not so much to force people out, but the value will change. So people, if the value rises, either people can't pay their bills or they'll
Taxes.
leave and things like that. So it's going to wind up. And then, of course, you have the influence of corporations buying housing.
That's right.
And so a lot of, all throughout the country, this is a common problem. So average people are getting priced out of even buying houses because they're competing against venture capital firms who are willing to put up money and invest in these things. So, I mean, a lot of the goal, and I even see this as a problem with congestion pricing, is that they don't want that the larger financial entities do not want people to be owners of and control their own destiny. They don't want people to be owners of property, you know, unless they can afford it. They don't want people to have their own personal vehicle unless they're wealthy enough and can afford it, meaning
Then
paying
they have a
the
limousine.
Exactly.
Driver.
So the choice shouldn't be, you know, for somebody who's on, you know, lives paycheck to paycheck, but let's say needs a car for tools and things like that. The choice shouldn't be either pay the congestion pricing toll or take an extra 2 hours to ride the bus to the subway or this and that. It should be. We talk about equity, but this is not an equitable plan.
And besides, who does the cost has to be passed along?
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
So
That's listen. I'm certainly, you know, I personally, you know, we've been talking about drastic tax cuts since Ronald Reagan was president, and I mean they used to joke that, you know, there's nothing, you know, nothing is certain in life other than death, taxes, and user fees.
Oh,
and we've been moving towards all of these user fees. So what's happening is you get the very wealthy who are getting tax breaks. They're getting incentives to invest in things like maybe buying up houses and then renting them out to others,
Right.
or create or throwing money at, let's say, some company that's got an idea for a little electronic thing on your phone and saying, we can just create a platform. You just go on your phone and we'll send a car, and some person is going to be a gig worker. We're not going to be responsible for his insurance or anything like that, and we'll make money off of this platform that we've created. This seems to be the idea. They don't the business model is to sort of pave the way for these alternative businesses, be they driving out small businesses, so there's more developable product, or delivery services. You have these the DoorDashes and the other things.
The conglomerates will take over the delivery services.
Well, that's in essence the idea. The big investors and the big money, and not only that, they'll do it in a way, and it's very, you know, even with congestion pricing, they're saying, well, you know, look at the union jobs we ended. But these groups are not, they're using gig workers. They feel that they're independent contractors, that they have no, if someone hits somebody on a moped or something while they're delivering, that they don't really have any responsibility because that person was responsible for their own actions. And
how do you know who the gig worker was who hit you? He's gotten back on his bicycle and he's off.
And I'm certainly not an anti-tech person, but there's a lot of talk, and I think we see it. I think the effort is, the vision is, maybe in a couple of years there'll be like total autonomous vehicles, that they won't even need these gig workers anymore. So there's this platform that's being created. The roads in theory are being emptied of private vehicles, all for the sake of this business model that may not even need workers anymore.
That's right, the autonomous car. How about federal, what part does the Federal Highway Administration play?
My understanding quickly, and this is the basis of some of the lawsuits, is that there was never a full environmental impact statement, like a fully researched and full disclosure of the methodologies that was done. So what the MTA did was what they called an assessment. They did their sort of own internal things and their own studies and things. You know, it was about 400 pages of stuff. But the Federal Highway Administration, I think, had to just approve whether that was good enough. And there was something called the FONSI, the finding of no substantial impact. So once they did that, they basically said, look, we think they addressed all of the environmental issues, so we'll give them a pass.
So even with the FHA disapproved whatever, I understand that the MTA still can go ahead. It's just window dressing.
So actually the way it is now is, you know, again, not only does the governor have control, but the New York State Department of Transportation has to sign off on it. That agency serves at the governor's pleasure. So the governor still has some control. And again, if anyone has a fiduciary duty, it's her. She has to worry about the finances of the state of New York, and she has to worry about all the people of the state of New York, not just the MTA.
What do you recommend that the general public, like my audience, for instance, should do?
Number one is, you know, stay informed. Look at who's making arguments and why. I mean, I find that it doesn't seem like anyone is really wants to have a dialogue here. I think there's an opportunity to sort of revisit it. I mean, the congestion pricing is a creature of pre-COVID and pre-high interest rates. So a lot has changed since then. Also, the technology's gotten better. So I think the thought of putting tolls up in and of itself is not bad. It's how is it used. And so I think something that's more fair and more saleable to the public can work out. And I also think that people should demand, what are we getting for our money? So in other words, if the only project that was sort of committed was adding 3 more stops to the 2nd Avenue subway, I think the MTA needs to be very, very clear about what are we getting for that. And I will say, London, they talked about the London model. London, they added a whole new subway line, 10% capacity, a direct connection to the airport. So we're not getting anything like that.
Arthur, I want to thank you so much. You were very, very informative. Until the next time, this is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thank you.